Today, I'm going to be showing you how to become incredibly overpowered in Elden Ring in just simply 1 hour of gameplay. For those of you that are OGs of the channel, you probably remember us doing a similar thing with Skyrim, and once again, we're going to be looking at the best build that you can create in the shortest amount of time, which is still capable of doing this to bosses' health bars. So if you're excited, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more juicy content like this. And I guess without further ado, let's jump straight into the build. Now, I will try and obviously keep this short and snappy for you guys so I don't spend an hour explaining how to do this in under an hour, but I will sometimes interject and give you tidbits of information that are important for certain parts of this particular build. Now, first of all, we had to have an objective look as to what is the quickest build that we can make that can also deal the most amount of damage, and that happened to be mage builds. This is mainly due to the fact that you can pick up some of the most overpowered and late game items without having to progress the story at all. I mean, you can pick up Comet Azure as soon as you gain access to Altus Plateau, and you can get somewhat a late game staff in the Meteorite staff by simply going to the swamp in Caelid, and that staff has an S scaling in intelligence. Mix that in with all sorts of buffs like Terra Magica, Golden Vow, and the Wonder Physic, and we're well on our way for a recipe of just pure destruction. So with that in mind, we need to make sure that we pick the best class around intelligence, and of course that's going to be the astrologer class. Not only is it the best in intelligence, but it also has a straight sword which we can use later on to apply a certain Ash of War, being Golden Vow. So we also don't have to worry about picking up another weapon throughout the run. And then for your keepsake, I would highly recommend putting on the Stone Sword key, as again that's going to help us access a certain area later on in the video. Now, as you're seeing in the background, it's just the standard setup straight away, trying to get our trusty steed Torrent as quickly as physically possible, because once we have Torrent in our possession, we can then use him to go to the various locations that we need to pick up some very key items. Of course, as I mentioned, we need Comet Azure and also the staff, but we also need to be picking up the Wonder Physic along with the Intelligence Knot tier and the Magic Shroud and Crack tier, because they grant plus 10 to our intelligence stat and plus 20% to our magic damage respectively. We of course need to pick up the Dectus Medallion as well to allow us to get to the Altus Plateau to get Comet Azure, as well as picking up a second Stone Sword key, Terra Magica, the Graven Skull Talisman, and one of the many Glintstone masks. So you can probably tell we're also going to take a quick trip to the Raya Lucaria Academy. So the easiest route for all of this is to basically go through Limgrave, get the Wonder Physic and the half of Medallion from Fort Hate, but then travel back, and I highly suggest that you get this Site of Grace beforehand, of course, to the Gatefront or any of the Site of Graces that are by a Gill Lake in the very beginning of Limgrave. This is because in the middle of that lake there is a trapped chest that will teleport you straight to the heart of Caelid and about 2 minutes away from the staff and Fort Feroth, where the second half of the medallion is being kept. So as soon as you get into the ruins, go past the rats in this particular room, and at the end will be that trapped chest that will teleport you to the Crystal Tunnel. Again, once you're here, head to the exit. Make sure that you use the Site of Grace, because the caveat with having a trapped chest activated on you is that it disables your ability to fast travel until you rest at the next Site of Grace. So I highly suggest resting at this particular Site of Grace whilst it's there before heading out into Caelid, which again, if you just head straight out into the swamp, you will come across these ruins where the Meteorite staff is being held. Grab that, head up the hills to Fort Feroth, grab the second medallion, but also be sure to drop down into this particular area and grab the Great Rune 8 that is hidden inside this area as well, because this is where I'm going to interject and tell you about how we're also going to be getting enough runes to level up our character, all whilst traversing through the Lands Between. There are many hidden runes throughout the Lands Between, including this one, but more specifically hidden in a lot of graveyards. You've probably seen them and come across them in your games before. If you haven't, there's just tombs laid out basically in front in certain areas, and inside some of the open tombs there will be an item that you can pick up, which will always be a Great Rune. These Great Runes can vary from literally anywhere between Great Rune 1 to Great Rune 10, depending on where you are in your game. So for instance, the ones in Limgrave are more than likely going to give you, say, Great Rune 1 through to 4, but in later game areas like Caelid, they're most likely going to have 1 or 2 Great Runes 6, 7, 8, those kind of higher level Great Runes. Like I say, there's many of these graveyards dotted around all of the key areas in the game, so you're borderline going past them anyway, so you might as well make use of that, especially as we don't have very many levels right now. But essentially, once you've got both halves of the medallion, the Wonder Physic and the staff, it's then time to move through Limgrave, up Storm Hill, defeat this particular guard to get that Ash of War Golden Vow, which we can apply to our sword later to again boost our damage output by 15% with this particular Ash of War, before using the shortcut to the right of Stormvale Castle to gain access to the Learning of the Lakes. All we need to really grab at this moment in time from here is the Glintstone Key, as well as the Intelligence Not tier, whilst heading straight for Altus Plateau. The reason why we're doing this is so then we can come back on ourselves to go to Raya Lucaria Academy later on. We might as well get the long haul out of the way to go and get Comet Azure, rather than stopping halfway through and coming back on ourselves again. We might as well just go whole hog straight for Comet Azure. Another tip as well for runes, if you're really struggling to find those graveyards that I was talking about, are also these particular enemies in the Learning of the Lakes, the hot air balloons, as I like to call them. They're hoisting up like the forearm militia bandits, but you don't need to worry about those guys. All you need to worry about is literally like the hot air balloon that they're being hoisted up by, because if you destroy them, which takes literally nothing, you can either use a throwing knife, or in this case, because we're a mage, we can use our Glintstone Pebble. You will then be granted with a Great Rune 6, which is 2,000 souls per balloon. In this specific area, right by the Intelligence Knot, there are about 5 or 6 of these balloons. There's also some in the previous areas, the Lake of Lernia, but this is where they're most common. So I would highly suggest, as we're passing through here anyway, going past the Glintstone Dragon after getting the Glintstone Key, you may as well make use of this and just hit them as you're going past to again get anywhere between 10 to 14,000 runes, as that will be about 5 or 6 levels. Again, for absolutely nothing. But as I mentioned just there, make sure you pick up the Intelligence Knot tier, which is located just to the left of this sort of like area of the lake, as if you're going up towards Carrier Manor, and in this like weird area with the weird hand spider dudes, and then work your way up to the Altus Plateau to go and get Comet Azure. Once you've successfully got Comet Azure, we can then backtrack and go through the Raya Lucaria Academy and get the Glintstone Helm, the Stone Sword Key, and the Graven Skull Talisman that we need. These are located in sort of like the upper levels of the academy, so you go past the graveyard into that like subsection after going up the elevator, and after that particular site of grace where the enemy sort of walks past you in the corridor, you can hang left and go through the illusionary wall at the end, which you can then wrap around, parkouring up the side of the cliff to pick up the Glintstone Mask, which will grant you +3 to your intelligence, which is more than enough. But then if we're heading towards the Red Wolf boss arena, just before the entrance of that, still go up the stairs as if you're going to fight them, but if you hang a left up the left hand staircase, there will be another illusionary wall which you can go through, which will again be holding the second Stone Sword Key that we need, along with the spell Comet in the chest. And then if we go up the ladder in this room and down the holes at the top, we will then break through into this room where the Graven Skull Talisman is located. So we've got our Stone Sword Key, we've got the talisman, and we've got the helm that we need. We can now get ourselves the hell out of there to quickly go and grab Terra Magica. Just to the east of the Glintstone Dragon will be this fog wall, and again you need 2 Stone Sword Keys in order to access this area, which is why it's pivotal to have the one at the very beginning as your keepsake, and obviously get this second one in the academy to then open up the fog wall and go to the academy cave, because at the end there's going to be a boss fight, and after beating these 2 bosses you will then have access to go and get Terra Magica. But I must say, this boss fight does require a lot of patience. I would highly suggest as well that if you ever see any golden seeds throughout the lands between, whether it's on Stormhill, in Caelid, wherever, pick them up, because you're going to need at least 4 or 5 Cerulean Flasks in order to deal enough damage and beat these 2 Crystallian bosses. The reason being is because normally you would use your greatsword or a heavy hitting weapon to break their armor in like 2 or 3 hits maximum. But where we're obviously not too high a level and we're using spells, so mainly relying on Glintstone Pebble at this moment, it's going to take around about 12 to 15 hits of the Glintstone Pebble to break their armor. The benefit though is once you break their armor, they're actually very easy to kill, and you stagger them each time with each use of the spell. But where it takes so many hits to break their armor, that's what consumes a lot of FP, and if you don't have, say, at least 4 Cerulean Flasks, you could end up using all of your FP and then just be stuck to use the sword, and if you get caught out, it could cause a lot of problems. But as long as you keep your distance, keep spamming away with the Glintstone Pebble, after about 3 or 4 minutes or so, you should have beaten this fight, and then have access to the elevator that will hoist you all the way up to go and grab yourself Terra Magica. And then the last thing that we need to do is go and beat one particular Erdtree avatar, which is to the east of the Lernia of the Lakes. More specifically, I would advise trying to go through the Frenzied Village Site of Grace. That is because this particular Erdtree avatar is mainly one of the most annoying, or at least annoying to get to, because you have to go through those like celestial beasts with their like phantom arrows that are just an absolute pain in the arse. And because we haven't put any points into health or anything just yet, you're more than likely going to get one shot. So, to avoid all of that and to make the fight also 10 times easier, if you go up through the Frenzy Flame Village and go to this particular site of grace, you can just essentially walk down the hill, jump off this particular ledge with Torrent, and you'll be in the Erdtree's boss fight without triggering or aggroing any of the celestial beasts, making this fight a hell of a lot easier to get to and a hell of a lot easier to take on. The moveset with the Erdtree avatars are very easy to dodge. As long as you're keeping your distance and walking backwards while still using the spells, you will just dodge 90% of the attacks anyway. The only ones you need to watch out for are when he's doing the jumping lunge attack. You do need to roll out of the way for that. And also when he's using like the version of the Erdtree stars like sort of spell where he has those yellow balls of light which will then spear through to you. In order to dodge that attack, you just need to basically run either left or right in that singular direction for the duration of that spell and you won't get hit. And then you can just go back to training the Erdtree avatar again, spamming him with Glintstone Pebble, and hopefully in about a minute and a half or so, he should be defeated, granting you the Magic Shrouding Crack tier. So, at this point, we've literally got everything that we need, but even with all of the rune collection we were doing, our level is still a bit on the low side. So, we basically just need to rerun the same Erdtree fight that we just did, but against the Putrid avatar that's hidden away in Caelid just north of Fort Varoth. Like I say, this fight is basically a carbon copy of the previous one to obtain the Magic Shrouding Crack tier, but this boss has a little bit more health compared to the previous avatar, so it's just an elongated battle. But again, as long as you keep the same tricks, keeping your distance, just spamming Glintstone Pebble, it should only really take about a minute and a half or 2 minutes at the very most. And why do we need to defeat this particular enemy against everybody else? It's because it's the easiest one to drop 91,000 runes. That is more than enough to get us from the 30-35 levels that we have to boost us all the way up to level 50. Because as we mentioned, with both the mask and the intelligence not tier, as long as we've got 47 intelligence as our base stat, using those two items combined will then push us up to 60, allowing us to use Comet Azure. And then it's just as simple as going to the round table, applying the Ash of War Golden Vow to your sword, and putting on Comet Azure. Oh, yeah, it takes 3 slots, doesn't it? Oh, for fuck. So, yeah, stupidly, I forgot that it takes more than 2 or even 1 slot of your memory stones, and granted that you only start with 2 slots, yeah, we needed to find 1 more from somewhere. Actually, we need to find 2 more because we also need a slot for Terra Magica. So we just went and bought one from the vendor here in the round table, and then went and visited my favourite pet, the Red Wolf, to defeat him in order to get the second memory stone, giving us 4 slots in total. And with that, I could apply Comet Azure and Terra Magica and make my way to Margit to absolutely obliterate him with this insanely OP build. All I had to do was pop Golden Vow, pop the Wonder Physic, prep Terra Magica, and unleash Comet Azure to defeat him in quickly. Yeah, he can stagger me, can't he? For God's sake. So, I could have possibly just brute forced the fight and stepped back a little bit and baited a certain attack to give me enough time to get the full length of the Comet Azure out, but I wasn't taking any chances. I was also annoyed that I was over the hour mark now because of all of this, so I just wanted to make sure I had a guaranteed kill, went and got Margit Shackle from Patches, went back, prepped it all again, and tried for the final time to use Comet Azure, and that was pretty successful. So in just under 1 hour and 24 minutes, which is, I know, not quite an hour, we managed to go and create an overpowered mage build capable of one-shotting a boss. Now, I know what you're going to be thinking, Jazz and me, we're not going to be sat here using Comet Azure all the time, especially when our mind is so minuscule. Like, how do you expect us to use this strat against every single boss? Well, the good thing is, you don't have to. Obviously, we don't have the Cerulean tier yet, and I wouldn't advise trying to get it, because the tree spirit that you need to kill in order to get that thing has an insane amount of health, and I would highly recommend leveling up your character before going to get that. But the spell that we picked up in Raya Lucaria Academy, Comet, is more than enough to deal damage against the higher end bosses, especially against people like Radahn, where you can go and get a large amount of runes. I would advise taking on Godric first, so you can go and get his Great Rune that gives you a +5 to every stat, helping out with the endurance so you can cast more spells without running out of stamina, and also Mind so that you can use Comet Azure for even longer than you were previously. And then literally from there, Comet will be your best friend, as you're going to be doing in and around 1000 damage with each use if you're using the Wonder Physic and also Terra Magica along with Golden Vow, making this a staple for your entire playthrough. And as you go on and progress through the game, you can then start to implement other stats, and I highly recommend either delving into Dex or Strength, so that you can also use weapons like Moonveil and the Dark Moon Greatsword as you get further into the game, doing even more damage as both of those weapons also scale with intelligence through their Ashes of War. So for a build that you can literally make in an hour or so, like I've shown you in this video, it is ridiculously overpowered and will carry you throughout the majority of the game until you gain access to those higher end spells or higher end weapons that you can implement using just simply intelligence, as that's the only stat that we've upgraded so far. Hopefully this has helped you out, and if you're looking for a new way to play the game or complete it in a very quick time, maybe you've got say 2 or 3 hours to kill and you want to see if you can beat as many bosses as possible in Elden Ring, then I would highly suggest using this build. Of course, you can utilize other glitches and things in the game to traverse through the game quicker and beat bosses that you shouldn't at level 1 kind of thing, but for an actual build that's feasible and easy to obtain and won't break the game in any way at all, this truly is such a fun way to test your skills whilst only implementing into one specific stat. If you've never used a mage build before, I highly recommend that you pick this up and try this for yourself, because even if you're struggling with Comet Azure, like I say, as long as you can get up to 50 in terms of your intelligence, you can just rely on Comet, and that is more than enough to carry you through any of the fights that we've seen so far. But yeah, that is essentially everything that I need to make you guys aware of. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, make sure you hit that like button down below. It's the quickest and easiest way to let me know that you enjoy this type of content and you want to see more around Elden Ring. We've of course hopefully got some major updates in terms of the DLC just around the corner, as there's a lot of rumours going around with the Game Awards hopefully having a section with From Software presenting a few updates on the upcoming DLC. I mean, it's almost been a year now since it's been teased, so fingers crossed they haven't forgotten and they are actually going to release that DLC. But yeah, if you want to stay up to date with everything around that, make sure that you subscribe, because you better know we're going to be covering any updates and details shown in those Game Awards. So yeah, make sure you're subscribed, hit that bell, and you'll stay up to date with all of the Elden Ring news. But otherwise, go and have an absolute blast with trying to make this particular build. Let me know if you've got any other builds that you can make even quicker or at a similar time that are just as good as this one, because I'll be always intrigued to know what you guys use, and if you have any knowledge of even better builds than obviously this one. So definitely make sure you get in the comments and let us know. But in all reality, I think you guys have suffered enough listening to my voice, so I'm going to leave that there before I ramble on too much. Thank you again for watching this video. I hope you're having an amazing day, and I guess I will catch you in the next video of whatever it is that we make. Bye bye.